It's exam time, and now it's time to review everything you've learned in Unit 3 Chemistry. Let's cover all of Unit 3 Chemistry in 3 minutes flat. The first topic you looked at was fuels, and in particular biofuels and fossil fuels. You looked at biodiesel, bioethanol and biogas, and compared that to things like coal, oil and natural gas. In doing this, you looked at the pros and cons of the extraction processes for all these fuels and looked at the chemical reactions involved in making them. Things like fermentation in bioethanol, transesterification in biodiesel, and then look at fractional distillation for crude oil. All these fuels produce energy, and what you had to understand is how to express this in a thermochemical equation, and also use these to calculate the amount of energy that you can obtain from these fuels. Lastly, one of the fundamental parts of the fuels topic was comparing biodiesel and petrodiesel, and in this you needed to look at the structure and properties of both of these molecules. After we looked at fuels, we started looking at galvanic cells, which is another way of producing energy, this time through redox reactions. So you needed to understand the fundamental principles of redox chemistry, oil rig. You also needed to look at galvanic cells and the features of these, such as anodes, cathodes, polarity and whatnot. And then you also looked at the design of organic and hydrogen-based fuel cells. We then took a break from fuels and started looking at equilibrium and rates of reactions. Rates of reactions we looked at in terms of collision theory. Equilibrium we looked at in terms of Le Chatelier's principle. We also then did some calculations to do with equilibrium and equilibrium constants. And in doing so, we looked at a particular way of solving these, which is known as an ice table. After looking at equilibrium for a while, we then took a train back to Redox Town and started looking at electrolysis. Electrolysis has a lot in common with galvanic cells, so a lot of the fundamental redox principles stayed the same for us. However, with electrolysis, we started putting energy into our system to drive chemical reactions. Applications and uses of electrolysis involved electroplating, electrorefining, production of reactive metals, and also recharging of batteries, which again has its roots in galvanic cells as well. We looked at the key design features of these cells, but also one thing I haven't got here is we did some calculations to do with Faraday and understanding how electrical charge is involved with redox reactions. So that's Unit 3 Chemistry in about 2.5 minutes, which means I've got 30 seconds to talk about generalized tips for chemistry. In your responses to exams, ensure that you actually use chemistry. What that means is write chemical equations, draw chemical structures, use the key phrases that you've been taught, such as collision theory and Le Chatelier's principle, talk about intermolecular forces as much as possible, and when you do calculations, write out what each calculation is about and the formulas you used.